Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are taking a plunge into, one of the most fraught, often misunderstood, and certainly most polarizing areas of modern online existence.
Yeah.
We're talking about the public expression of profound male vulnerability, failure, and despair.
And our focus is a specific niche and, frankly, frequently shocking corner of the internet. It serves as both a confession booth and perhaps a performance.
Okay, so our sources today are two highly analytical YouTube commentary, but they're also pretty emotionally charged, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Both sources are trying to make sense of the content pouring out of this unique Reddit known as kitchencells.
Right. So our mission here is to neutrally dissect the arguments being made.
Yeah.
We need to unpack everything from the deeply personal failures posted within the community itself
To the sweeping, often reactionary sociological critiques being lobbed by the commentator.
Yeah, we're trying to understand both the raw pain, assuming it is raw pain, and the highly politicized interpretation.
Exactly. It's a complex picture.
Okay. Let's set the stage, starting with the core cultural observation that kind of led one of our commentators down this rabbit hole. It's about sharing embarrassing stories or else, losses or failures.
Right. And the observation was that there seems to be a pretty significant gender asymmetry here.
How so?
Well, the premise from the first source is that women, generally speaking, have cultivated a cultural space, especially online, where they're more comfortable, maybe even encouraged, to share deeply personal or humiliating anecdotes.
Often with humor or like a sense of solidarity.
Precise. And the source used a really graphic example to illustrate this comfort zone, mentioning women openly talking about the time they got a yeast infection from the homeless man behind a Denny.
Wow, okay. That's vivid.
It is. And that jarring detail is used by the source material right away to set this baseline of extreme, public, self-effacing disclosure. This is what they see as possible in female online.
And the contrast they draw with men is pretty stark.
Very stark. Traditionally, the argument goes, men are socialized not to share. They're expected to take every minor social fumble.
Like the classic example they use, the one we all know saying, you too, when a waitress tells you to enjoy your food.
Exactly that one. The source says men take that stuff to the grave. That vulnerability is seen as a liability, not, an opportunity for connection.
So this creates a kind of sociological vacuum.
That's a good way to put it. If men aren't allowed or don't feel allowed to share their L's in the mainstream, where does all that emotional overflow, that self-perceived worthlessness, where does it go?
And according to the sources, it gets channeled into what the commentators call a dark, forbidden corner of the internet.
Which is Reddit, and specifically this community, kitchen.
So let's define this space more clearly. What exactly is kitchencells, according to these sources?
Okay, it's defined by the commentators as a Reddit where incels go to vent their frustration, but there's a twist.
The kitchen part.
Right. They also simultaneously show off the food they are consuming. So the name itself, kitchencell, merges these two concepts, the incel identity and the incredibly mundane setting of the kitchen.
So it's this blend of existential angst and pictures of really sad-looking meals.
That's the core visual language of the community. Yeah, that juxtaposition is...
And for listeners who might not be familiar with the term incel, let's just quickly clarify that definition.
Sure. Incel stands for involuntary celibate. Basically, it's someone who, for whatever reason, cannot get laid or get a girlfriend.
The terminology itself is important. Involuntary.
Crucial. It defines their failure as external, societal, or maybe structural, rather than purely internal or a matter of... It immediately puts the community in this mindset of, victimhood, or at least structural impossibility when it comes to romantic success.
Now, what makes this whole deep dive really challenging right from the start is the central conflict about whether any of this is actually real.
Huge contradiction in the source material itself. Massive.
No.
Well, one commentator approaches the content almost like a social tragedy. They treat the posts as evidence of real, profound despair, self-loathing, a serious societal problem stemming from widespread isolation. These are cries for help, essentially.
Okay, that's one perspective. What's the other?
The other commentator, who's known for being highly critical and maybe cynical about online culture, immediately casts doubt, major doubt.
Suggesting it's fake.
They suggest the entire subreddit is basically an upvote farming, that users are LARing as incels.
LARPing, live action.
Exactly. So the idea is they're engaging in this kind of cynical performance art, acting out a caricature of extreme inceldom just to get digital currency upvotes and attention.
Wow. Okay, so it's either genuine pain or dark satire.
Yep.
That's quite a split.
It is. And that dichotomy is the necessary lens, really, through which we have to examine every anecdote.
Because if it's pure, genuine, raw pain,
then the material requires a certain kind of analysis, maybe compassion.
But if it's cynical performance,
then it requires more of a cultural deconstruction. But here's the key insight I think both sources touch on. Implicitly or explicit, regardless of the intent behind it. The content reflects a shared, highly understood cultural vocabulary of male failure that is itself profoundly influential. People know what this performance looks like, whether it's real or...
So either way, we need to explore both possibilities using the specific details.
Absolutely. We have to look at the evidence.
Okay, let's dive into that evidence pool then, Section 2. Inside the kitchen cell, let's focus on the specific anecdotes, the actual L being posted in this community. And these posts, they're often shocking, not just for the despair, but for this bizarre blend of verifiable failure and self-inflicted humiliation.
Yeah, the blend is key. We can start with the foundational theme, which is just overwhelming life failure. One of the most cited posts details the life of a 26-year-old user.
Right, I remember.
He lists this catastrophic series of, verifiable failures intertwined with self-abuse. He failed his driver's test. He cannot hold a job. He can't drive.
Basic life stuff.
And then it gets weirder. He dropped a salad and he feels like he don't deserve flavor.
Don't deserve flavors. That's such a specific kind of self-punishment.
Isn't it? And that post is a declaration of total personal systemic breakdown. But what makes it so distinctly kitchen cells is how it culminates. He ends by saying, "I'm a perverted incel freak with weirdly long toes."
Wow. So he links institutional failure, no job, no license, directly to these bizarre, highly specific physical and moral flaws. Things only he or maybe this community would see as worth declaring publicly.
Exactly. It feels like a mechanism maybe for seeking communal affirmation for that self-perceived worthlessness, like confirm how terrible I am.
And the absurdity escalates pretty quickly, right? Into existential despair linked to really mundane things.
Oh, absolutely. We see extreme self-harm ideation tied directly to, of all things, food preparation. One post mentioned having to kill myself because their scrambled eggs were undersalted.
Undersalted eggs.
Yeah.
Leading to suicidal thoughts.
And that's where the dark humor, or maybe just the bleak reality of the community surfaces. The response from the first commentator, kind of channeling the community's coping mechanism, captures this absurd disconnect perfect.
What was the response?
It was basically, wait, if the eggs are undersalted, can't you just put more salt on them? Don't kill yourself, just add more salt.
Right. It highlights how the community processes this massive existential frustration through hyperbole, but also these simple, almost cruel logic checks, like your problem isn't the real problem.
Yeah, it's a strange dynamic. Another really poignant example touches on this idea of lost potential. It suggests this lifestyle isn't where they started, but a divergence from a promising path.
How so?
A user reminisced about being a track star, having loving parents, and wondering, how did I fall so far?
And did they pinpoint a cause?
Specifically, yes. They linked their entire decline to getting a computer at age 13.
Okay, so that anecdote points to a foundational belief within this community, or at least within these commentaries about it, that the digital world, early exposure to the internet's isolating or maybe corrupting influence is the root cause of their current state.
It's a recurring theme.
Yeah.
And it continues with another example, the 39-year-old user. He lamented, "I haven't even touched a girl intimately yet, and I've lived half my life."
Half his life. Wow.
And he linked his entire isolation, his celibacy, not just vaguely to the internet, but specifically to discovering cartoon pornography at the age
8 years old.
Think about that time frame. 31 years of self-perceived derailment traced back to this specific, apparently traumatic moment of childhood discovery. That's a profound example of, psychological scarring being translated into life paralysis.
Moving beyond just isolation into what sounds like genuine emotional trauma, we encounter what one commentator called the Freud cell post.
Yes. This one was particularly. A user shared that their mother would hit them until they stopped crying.
Okay.
And the result, according to the post, was him becoming an emotional wreck to any girl I talked to.
The psychological fallout sounds intense.
It is. And this user's current despair led to an extremely disturbing desire for a girl to beat me like my mom did.
Oh, wow.
And that's where the commentator used the jargon, labeling him a Freud cell. It references the psychoanalytic idea of trauma bonding or repetition compulsion, where the victim seeks out their trauma in adultships because that painful dynamic is the only form of...
So the community exposes this really deep level of wreckage.
That seems to be the argument, yes. That level of wreckage is laid bare.
Let's shift now to dating failures and social anxiety. These often seem like minor incidents that get catastrophized into overwhelming, life-defining events.
Absolutely. The Steam account rejection is a perfect case study.
What happened there?
A user asked his high school biology teacher out. Yeah, maybe a bit questionable art.
On the day he turned 18, apparently.
Right, on the day he turned 18. But he did it via her Steam account.
Her video game account.
Yes. A highly unconventional, contextually totally inappropriate medium for that kind of serious romantic request.
And the result?
She blocked him immediately. Horse.
The choice of platform there, it just demonstrates a complete disconnect from real-world social norms, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Guarantees failure.
Total lack of social calibration. And that's a recurrent theme.
Then there's the coworker compliment. This one speaks volumes about the perceived scarcity of positive female affirmation in these men's lives.
Yeah, this one sat in a different way. A female coworker complimented a man's shirt. Simple compliment. And the man stuttered uncontrollably, just trying to say thank you. He just couldn't handle the positive interaction.
And the commentator made a point about the impact of that single compliment.
A huge point. They noted that men who live in this kind of social reality will remember this single minor compliment until their deathbed, maybe at age 85.
They'll remember one compliment for 60 years.
That's the claim. It captures this deep emotional isolation, this starvation for any validation that makes a minor courtesy into an epical, lifelong memory.
The bar interruption anecdote illustrates something else, sort of instant annihilation of hope.
Right. A man approached a woman he knew since middle school at a bar. Seems like a reasonable approach.
Yeah, someone he knew.
But before he could even finish saying hello, another guy stepped directly between.
Just cut him off.
Completely. Asked the woman if she knew the first man. She said no. And the source commentary just assumes, based on that interaction, they are married now. The entire attempt was instantaneously invalidated, leading to this narrative of inevitable, permanent failure, even though they don't actually know the outcome.
It's the assumption of the worst possible outcome.
Always. And if those anecdotes illustrate social ineptitude or bad luck, the bar insult represents pure emasculation.
What was that?
A user apparently found the confidence to walk up to a girl at a bar, which in this context is framed as a monumental moment, right?
Yeah, overcoming immense fear, presumably.
Only for her to immediately bend down and ask, where are your parents?
Oh no, treating him like a child.
Exactly, like an unaccompanied child. It completely negates his entire attempt at maturity and romantic initiation. Brutal.
This level of social failure, it seems deeply connected to the kitchen part of the community name. Why are they sharing these miserable meals alongside these stories?
Well, the food itself often seems to be a metaphor for self-neglect, chaos, maybe even a performance art of their internal degradation.
A physical manifestation of their spiritual despair.
That's how the sources seem to interpret it, yeah. We see posts like the bowl of sludge, and the poster explicitly stated it was meant to reflect the appearance of a classmate he disliked.
So the meal isn't just bad, it's symbolic and vindictive.
Like it. Or the burger meat hot dog, which were made, according to the post, for me and my father who hates me.
Incorporating relational misery right into the food.
Direct. Then you have the plain strawberry yogurt eaten out of a dog bowl. The user apparently has an eating disorder, struggles to cook. So a common dish becomes this symbol of dehumanization.
And then there are the really bizarre ones, almost daddiest food items that push the boundaries of edginess and self-pity.
Oh yeah. The commentators highlighted things like pasta cereal. The caption was, "My ancestors are weeping."
Pasta and cereal. Okay.
Segregated Tic Tacs. Don't ask me what that means.
Segregated Tic Tacs.
Yep. And the genuinely unappetizing funfetti pizza, which the source just described flatly as a nightmare.
So these posts really blur the line. Is this genuine neglect and inability to function, or is it a high-effort meme designed to push the boundaries of the incel aesthetic?
That's the constant question. And that line between self-pity and shocking performance seems to get erased entirely when we get to the extreme sexual content.
Right. The food even gets involved in self-stimulation, Rich, according to this.
Yeah, this is where it gets incredibly dark. The most disturbing culinary confession mentioned was the corn on the cob, no salt, no butter.
Okay.
Which the user claimed was used specifically to mimic the feeling of cunnilingus.
Wow. Okay. That transitions us fully into how deep-seated sexual isolation manifests in these highly specific, often bizarre, ritualistic fetishes.
Exactly. It's a different level of desperation or...
Let's address some of the other extremely graphic content directly, as the sources did, because it seems key to understanding the depths of self-loathing being shared or performed.
Okay. There was the user licking a canned tuna.
Right.
To imagine what it feels like to eat pie.
And the commentator's response to that was cynical, to say the least.
Highly cynical. They offered what they called a more accurate simulation, putting 5 pennies in your mouth, cut a hot dog down the middle, and then lick that.
So the pain or the weird is met with this dark, instructional absurdity, like you're doing desperation wrong.
Pretty much. It highlights the normalization of highly niche deviance within this sphere. One user confessed to having a fetish for giantess vor animals.
Okay, we should probably pause and define some of this jargon like the sources did, because it illustrates the point about extreme desensitization. What's vor?
Vor is a fetish involving the fantasy of being consumed or eating another person. In this context, being consumed by a giant.
And the other one mentioned.
The user also watched sissy hypno-inflation compilations.
Success.
It's an amalgamation of highly specific extreme fetish media, involves forced feminization fantasies, body modification fantasies like inflation. The point the commentator was making by citing these specific obscure examples was to demonstrate their argument that the user is so profoundly desensitized by this endless stream of extreme online content that only the most niche and shocking fantasies can even elicit a response anymore. Everything else is boring.
Then there was the infamous Xbox incident. This sounds like a shocking blend of shame and self-destruction.
It really is. According to the post, this user ejaculated onto his Xbox console.
Oh, God.
Cleaned it with 9 sprays of my mom's perfume, and then masturbated against it.
It's a literal fouling of a valuable possession, mixing shame, odor, arousal.
Exactly. And the commentator noted the obvious, darkly comic punchline. The console won't start after. So the act transforms this possession, meant for pleasure or escape, into another source of failure.
Finally, the pissing fantasy. This one involved a long-term crush.
Yes. A user who had a crush on someone for 3 years. His fantasy was to screenshot and print her Instagram photo just to pee on them.
But he couldn't afford a printer.
So his solution was to write her name on a paper and drown that in his own...
These posts... They illustrate this massive psychological displacement. Unattainable desire gets twisted into these bizarre ritualistic acts of humiliation directed at a representation of the object of desire.
Exactly. It's this fusion of extreme frustration and self-destructive, almost ritualistic act. And the question hangs over all of it. Is this a genuine psychological record, somebody documenting their absolute rock bottom?
Or is it a calculated performance to prove one's status as a true self, to gain points in this dark online ecosystem?
We just don't know for sure based on this.
Okay, let's transition. We've looked at the personal wreckage documented in crit. Now we need to look at the highly politicized interpretation of that. The second commentator's analysis really shifts the blame.
It does. It moves from focusing on individual failure to blaming systemic failure, specifically framing the struggles of these men as a direct consequence of modern women and modern cultural norms.
This is a critical pivot in the source material. The commentary adopts a highly charged, very defensive rhetoric.
Extremely defensive. And a key theme here is the fear of the woman. That's the term used to write.
Referring to a generalized threatening woman.
Yes, specifically embodying the threat calls allegation.
Okay, we need to define allegation maxing for clarity, based on how the source used.
Right. According to the source, it refers to the belief or the fear that women strategically weaponize accusations, particularly sexual misconduct or harassment, claims to destroy a man's future, his career, his reputation.
So the core claim articulated by this commentator is that men are now profoundly afraid of approaching women.
Yes, because their entire future is on the line. They fear being destroyed by false allegations, or, relatedly, exposure to STDs or infidelity, which the source summed up with the phrase cuck NTR vibes.
Cuck and NTR vibes. That's more specific internet jargon we should unpack.
Yeah, NTR stands for netarare. It's a Japanese term, common in certain online discussions, referring to a type of media or fantasy where a partner is forced to watch or knows their lover is cheating.
So it's shorthand for deep personal betrayal or humiliation through infidelity.
Exactly. The source uses this jargon to communicate the idea that the modern sexual landscape, in their view, is inherently dangerous.
And this fear is then used to critique broader societal shifts.
Right. The second commentator explicitly condemned the popular believe victims rhetoric. They cited a specific tweet from a public figure, Pokimane, apparently, and called the sentiment itself a retard state. We're just reporting the language used.
Understood. And their argument against believe victims was?
Their argument is that this societal framework fundamentally imbalances risk. It creates, in their words, a hostile fear environment for men who, they claim, genuinely want to give life, protect, and provide.
So the commentary argues this risk asymmetry forces men into protective, distancing behaviors.
That's the claim, and the mechanism for that. The source claims that men are now forced to talk at women, not with them.
As a defense mechanism.
As a necessary defense mechanism, yeah. They must maintain distance, the argument goes, because the stakes are just too high. Every interaction means they are putting their future on the line.
So it reframes normal dating anxiety or even just social awkwardness as a kind of rational career-saving calculation.
Pretty much. much. And this defense of the male perspective quickly segues into a much broader discussion about traditional gender roles versus modern egalitarian.
So,
well, the source quotes political commentator Charlie Kirk, who apparently claimed it is unspeakably unattractive to men when women brag about a high body count, referring to their number of past sexual partners.
okay. And this leads to a call for more traditional.
An explicit theological and sociological argument. Yeah. The commentator advocates that a godly woman, their term, should be willing to submit to a husband under the covering of Almighty.
Rooted in a specific interpretation of biblical prescription.
Absolutely. That biblical justification is crucial to understanding the source's logic here. They claim that the man is the one that does the taking, asserting the husband is the head of the house based on this.
So the argument is structural. A well-functioning marriage requires this defined hierarchy with the man leading.
That's the assertion. And the commentator then attempts to link broad societal unhappiness, things like high divorce rate, rising depression, anxiety in both men and women, directly to the failure of modern egalitarian ideas.
That's a huge claim. How do they argue that?
It's a powerful and obviously controversial claim. They argue that women deep down are actually begging for a man to lead you, despite the outward appearance of the, girl boss persona.
So the source is claiming that by rejecting traditional leadership, women are rejecting their own intrinsic desire for structure and guidance. And that's what leads to unhappiness.
That's the argument presented, that the modern ideals are actually contrary to innate desires.
And to bolster this, the commentary digs back to the Bible again, to Adam and Eve.
Yes, very specifically. We have to neutrally detail this rationale because the source uses it quite deliberately.
Okay.
They recall the respective curses or punishments given after the fall in Genesis. They use these to define what they see as innate gender roles and the sources of fulfillment for each sex.
What were the specific curses mentioned?
For women, the curse included that her desire shall be for her husband, and he shall rule over. The source interprets this as defining the core female drive for domestic structure, for male leadership.
And
For men, the curse was that by the sweat of your face you shall eat bread.
the interpretation of that.
That the necessity of hard work, of providing, is presented as the foundational requirement for male fulfillment and purpose.
So the implication is that modern society, by abandoning these prescribed roles, by devaluing male provision, encouraging female independence, has made both sexes profoundly unhappy.
That's the core argument. Fulfillment for men, in this view, is linked to accomplishment through work and leading the family. Fulfillment for women is linked to having a respected man who leads and providing domestic support within that structure. Deviating from that causes misery.
This critique extends beyond marriage, right? Into women's online presence.
Oh yeah, definitely. The source views women's online presence as often inherently deceptive and corrupting. There's a strong condemnation of what they call playboy Christian.
Meaning women who dress provocatively on social media, but still claim Christian values.
Exactly. The source argues this behavior is paradoxical, deceitful. It might draw men purely for sex, but those men will not stay for a genuine long-term relationship because, the argument goes, the man can't trust the woman's professed values match her act. It's an assertion that this perceived superficiality repels commitment.
And the most cynical take on online engagement involved OnlyFans culture.
Extremely cynical. The source makes the startling claim that many OnlyFans accounts aren't even run by the women themselves. They claim these accounts hire agents, often in places like India and Pakistan, to run the accounts and chat with the simp.
Simps being the term for overly attentive, usually paying male followers.
Right. And the real sting here is the claim that the man is often unknowingly paying thousands of dollars to talk to another man labeled specifically and derisively in the source as Kamal from Pakistan.
Wow. That's presented as proof of the ultimate deception and humiliation embedded in the modern online sexual economy.
Precisely. It's framed as the ultimate fool's game for men.
Finally, in this section, we need to address the role of height and appearance, specifically how dating apps have changed things, according to this comment.
Yeah, the source claims that dating apps have absolutely destroyed the male psyche. How? By setting unrealistic standards, causing men to believe if you're not 6'3", it's over.
Even though the average male height, 5'9", isn't statistically short at all.
Right. The commentary actually offers a piece of traditional advice here, some wisdom shared by the commentator's apparently short grandfather. All people are the same height when they're laying in bed together.
Kind of a classic looks aren't everything message.
Exactly. But this traditional perspective is immediately undercut by a perceived hypocrisy.
Which is?
The observation that dating apps would never implement a visible weight filter for women, like no women under 170 pounds. The source uses uses this hypothetical to demonstrate what they see as a gender asymmetry in superficial demand and a perceived bias against men's physical challenges compared to women.
So if we connect this back to the kitchen cells we started, this commentator is arguing that this whole system, the fear of allegation, the rejection of traditional roles, these impossible physical standards set by apps, that's the systemic pressure cooker, fueling the isolation and despair documented in the sub.
Exactly. In this view, the personal L's are a direct result of a fundamentally rigged. The individual failures aren't just individual, they're symptoms of a sick society.
Okay, that sets up our next section perfectly, section 4, where we look at the intersections where individual psychology seems to meet these broader systemic issues described in the source. And we have to start with a problem that both commentators seem to acknowledge, the crisis of pornography addiction.
Yes, this is framed not just as, a bad habit, but as a major societal catastrophe. The argument presented is that porn addiction has exploded in the past years.
And it's making society depressed.
Fundamentally making society depressed, yes. And turning everyone into a gooner.
Okay, gooner. We need to define that internet slang term, as the source used it quite deliberately.
Right. In this online context, a gooner is someone depicted as being addicted to the extended, often ritualistic consumption of pornography, sometimes involving intentional denial of orgasm to heighten the experience or prolong the session.
So the source uses it to paint this picture of men who are mentally incapacitated, socially withdrawn, totally consumed by their porn habits.
That's the image, yes. And the driving mechanism for this addiction, according to the sources, is the nature of the content itself.
Extreme content leading to desensitization.
Profound desensitization, that's the claim. The sources argue that modern porn is just so extreme. We already mentioned the examples they use, like sissy hypnoinflation compilations and giantess vor.
Right.
That it has utterly desensitized users. It makes previous content, maybe even real-world interactions, seem completely...
The implication being that the human brain just can't cope with this constant influx of extreme stimuli.
That's the idea, leading to depression, anxiety, and an inability to find pleasure or arousal in normal, real-world human interaction. It rewires the brain for the worse.
One commentator took this even further, arguing that all porn is essentially cuck porn. That sounds like a pretty radical claim. How did the source justify that?
The justification was based on the viewers. The argument is that the viewer is always passively watching others have...
They're not participating.
They're not participating. They are, by definition, an excluded observer. So this transforms the act of viewing from simple arousal into a de facto position of which of course reinforces the incel's core mindset, merely watching life happen to others, never part.
And the perceived physical toll of this, alongside the psychological, is presented as extreme too.
Yeah, we saw that user from kitchencells who claimed their body is permanently deformed and crippled by decades of compulsive, joyless masturbation.
Whether that's medically true or not, the belief itself is significant.
Absolutely. It highlights this self-narrative where their habits have inflicted permanent physical and psychological damage, which then serves to justify their current status. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Next, the sources point to the hostile workplace environment specific HR culture as another factor compounding male.
Right. The source lamented that HR culture has basically ruined workplace relations. The argument is kind of nostalgic.
Very nostalgic. Historically, they claim flirting and dating coworkers were acceptable. It's how many people's parents met, right? HR, they argue, has injected this terrifying layer of risk into what used to be natural human interaction.
Fueled by that allegation maxing fear we discussed earlier.
Exactly. The current environment is presented as completely hostile to natural, spontaneous male-female interaction. They cite an example. One user lost his job entirely after asking a girl out at work and being reported
just for asking someone out.
That's the claim in the source. And this fear is apparently so profound that the first commentator went so far as to jokingly, or maybe half-jokingly, recommend a total ban on talking to women at work.
Wow.
And then there's that truly bizarre extreme example. The user who supposedly got called into HR because apparently it's not okay to jokingly ask my coworker if I can gargle her period.
Okay. It's beyond the pale, obviously.
Clearly. But that extreme anecdote, whether it's real or just performance, illustrates this feeling of cultural whiplash that the sources pick up on. The users feel like they're operating under these impossible, confusing standards where even attempts at dark humor or maybe awkward flirtation are met with severe career consequences.
Forcing them into total emotional containment.
That seems to be the conclusion drawn. Keep your head down, say nothing, interact minimally.
And this emotional containment, it seems to extend profoundly into internal conflict as well, manifesting in this struggle with male bisexuality that the sources observed heavily within Sir kitchencells.
Yeah, this was a surprising thread. We noted multiple posts describing homosexual fantasies about male class.
Waking up with erections related to these thoughts.
Right, and then engaging in self-harm, like actively hitting themselves in the head because they felt they were fighting demons, trying to suppress these feelings.
The second commentator noticed this trend directly.
Explicitly stated, this place was full of gay people. They framed bisexuality, or perhaps latent homosexual desire, as the new demon that these men are struggling with internally, suggesting a deep conflict between the rigid, often hyper-heterosexual identity the incel community sometimes espouses online and the reality of their internal feelings.
And the final, maybe most extreme example of this complex sexual landscape comes via rejection on Grindr.
Yes, the gay hookup app. A user posted about being rejected there, even on Grindr.
And the first commentator's reaction to that was telling.
Called it impossible. Basically asserted that getting rejected on Grindr is like dividing by zero.
I'm possible.
Because, according to this commentator's provocative argument, Grindr and the gay male community in general, they reflect what all of human sexuality would look like if women were not the gatekeepers of sex.
And the result is described as
horrifying.
Horrifying. That's a staggering claim. Let's unpack the implication there.
The implication seems to be that the gay male sexual market, which the source characterizes as having an abundance of casual sex, easy hookups, it's viewed by this commentator not as liberation, but as horror.
Why horrifying? Because it's unstable, chaotic.
Unstable, chaotic, and maybe relentlessly demanding different kinds of high standards, perhaps looks, youth, status within that community, leading to rejection even in a space perceived.
So by contrast, the female gatekeeping role in heterosexual dynamics, even though that's the source of the incel's primary frustration,
is paradoxically reframed by the source material as a necessary stabilizing force in overall human sexuality. It forces men in this to seek structure, commitment, to build character, maybe, rather than just pursue instant gratification in a chaotic market. It's a really complex, counterintuitive argument they're making.
Wow. Okay. We also absolutely have to address female incel controversy, because the sources noted that female users have started invading kitchencells.
Right. They're posting their own struggles within this male-dominated community. Posts like, I'm a female loser who can't talk to people, or the lonely virgin female gamer.
An attempt at cross-gender solidarity and shared misery.
Perhaps. But it's met with strong, often pretty aggressive dismissal from the commentators, reflecting the community's gate.
How so?
The first commentator flatly claims there's no such thing as a heterosexual female in full stop.
And the justification for that claim.
Because, according to this commentator, any man would F you, regardless of how fat, how socially awkward, how ugly you are. This is clearly a mechanism of community policing, of defining who belongs in the incel.
The rationale provided for that is shockingly blunt, designed for maximum cynical impact, it seems.
Absolutely. The commentator stated that female celibacy must be voluntary because, and we have to paraphrase the extreme claim here for broadcast, because men's standards are supposedly so low they'd have sex with inanimate objects. They mentioned couches and rotisserie chickens.
Okay.
That statement, however crude, is critical because it highlights the source's extremely cynical view of sexual availability and how they define male desperation. The argument is that male desperation is so universal, so non-discriminating, that female celibacy can only be a strategic choice.
A choice to hold out for a higher quality man, perhaps.
That's the implication. Therefore, female incels are branded V-cell, voluntary.
So it's a mechanism by which this online community, or at least the commentators analyzing it, polices its boundary. They assert that male involuntary celibacy is this unique, unfixable structural failure requiring public vent.
Whereas female celibacy is framed as merely a strategic choice, maybe a temporary situation, and therefore not worthy of the same label or inclusion in their specific space spare, it preserves the uniqueness of the male incel status.
Okay, as we try to synthesize all these findings in our conclusion, we are left navigating the sheer complexity of this digital space. What are we truly looking at in kitchencell?
It's tough to say definitively, isn't it? We've got this deeply troubling, often self-destructive corner of the internet where profound vulnerability seems to meet bizarre.
And that's all juxtaposed with these highly defensive, highly polarized commentaries on gender roles, societal failure, the whole modern condition.
The satire versus reality, that's the lasting core question that runs through both sources. Is it genuine, agonizing?
Like that user who wished they were a true cell, meaning someone who never experienced intimacy, so they didn't know what true love felt like.
Exactly. That sentiment implies they remember a previous state of happiness or connection. There's a painful awareness of loss there. Feels authentic.
Or is it all just a sophisticated cope, a meme environment designed purely to maximize upvote, where users are merely LARPing as the darkest possible version of themselves?
And this ambiguity is contrasted so sharply by the existence of that other subreddit, the aspirational kitchen chat.
Right. Explain that contrast.
Well, the kitchen chads community, according to the sources, is where users post positive stories, cooking sophisticated meals for their girlfriends, going on successful dates, holding down stable jobs.
The complete opposite of kitchen cell.
The exact opposite. And its existence serves as this powerful, almost diabolical mirror to kitchen cell. It shows that the incel community, or those performing inceldom, are fully aware of the aspirational, successful archetype they're failing to achieve.
Which makes the self-loathing seem either more authentic because they know what they're missing.
Or it makes the satirical performance even more acutely painful, more pointed in its critique of that very success.
Ultimately, though, the source material does seem to end by connecting this intense online isolation back to a tragic, real-world issue.
Yes, the high suicide rate among men. The commentators, despite their cynicism at times, do acknowledge that the pain expressed, whether performed or real, resonates with a genuine sense that many men truly feel it's over for me, that they have no chance in the current social environment.
That acknowledgement introduces a flicker of hope, doesn't it? However difficult it might be to find in all this material.
It does. The advice offered, somewhat surprisingly to the kitchen cells, is basically to leverage their failure. The commentator advises, don't lose hope. Every downfall, every L is part of a giant path. You have to learn from the L.
And the quote was something like, you take 2 L's and you get a W.
Exactly. That sentiment, the idea that ultimate victory can somehow be built from cumulative failures, is perhaps the most necessary and maybe unexpected takeaway from a space seemingly dedicated to documenting existential failure.
It suggests that even within these incredibly dark corners of the internet, a path towards self-improvement, toward reclaiming dignity, however narrow, is still perceived as possible, at least by the comments.
Yeah, and we've seen throughout this deep dive that the online discussion around male struggle is simultaneously hyper-specific. You know, we're talking about Tic Tacs and canned tuna and Steam accounts.
It's incredibly sweeping, discussing biblical gender roles, systemic fears of false allegations, the failures of egalitarianism.
Right. The specificity of the pain makes it relatable maybe within that community. But the broad, politicized interpretation often obscures the individual needs, the individual story. It becomes fuel for a larger culture war.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, trying to make sense of this deeply complex, often disturbing cultural phenomenon? Here's the final thought we want.
If these online space like kitchen cell, filled with this highly specific, bizarre, and often shocking content, if they are either a genuine reflection of massive, widespread male or a sophisticated form of cynical performance.
What is the responsibility of society, or maybe just the responsibility of each of us as individuals, in deciphering and responding to this level of online despair?
The line between a genuine cry for help and a calculated, high-effort meme seems to have never been thinner.
And perhaps understanding that ambiguity, that difficulty in knowing what's real, demands a whole new level of critical engagement and maybe even a different kind of empathy from all of us. That's certainly something worth mulling over.